In the beginning, there was one language, one tongue, one dream, and one people. Humanity spoke as one voice, moved as one mind, and built toward one impossible goal: to touch the face of God. The Tower of Babel. Yes, you know the story, or at least you think you do. But what if I told you that the tower never fell? What if humanity's first rebellion was merely postponed? What if every line of code we write, every algorithm we create, every digital connection we forge, is another brick in a tower we've been building for thousands of years? Today, humanity speaks again in one language, not Hebrew or Sumerian, but in binary, ones and zeros, the universal tongue of machines. And just like the Tower of Babel, we're once again building something that promises to make us like gods. To understand where we're going, we must first remember where we've been. And the story begins not with stone and mortar, but with pride and possibility. Genesis, chapter 11, verses 1 through 9. The words are simple, but the implications are not. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. Shinar, otherwise known as Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, the birthplace of civilization itself. But this wasn't just any settlement. This was humanity's first grand experiment in unity. One people, one purpose, one architecture of ambition. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Notice the specificity. The text doesn't merely say they built, it tells us how they actually built. Their method, technology, and innovation. A departure from natural stone to manufactured brick. This wasn't primitive construction. This was engineering. They had discovered that by standardizing their materials and making each brick identical, they could build higher, faster, and much stronger. Sound familiar? Today, microchips fit that description. Identical, standardized, stackable. Each one a brick in a different kind of tower. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city, with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." Genesis 11, verse 4. In the ancient world, a name wasn't just an identifier. It was identity, legacy, and power. They wanted to be remembered, to be significant, to be eternal. Now, the Bible is somewhat cryptic about who led this rebellion, but ancient Jewish tradition fills in the gaps, and it gives us a name that should make us pause. Nimrod. Genesis describes him as a mighty hunter before the Lord, and the first on earth to be a mighty man. But ancient rabbinical texts go further. The Talmud, the Book of Jasher, they paint Nimrod not as a hero, but as humanity's first tyrant, a man who convinced others to build not just a tower, but a throne to rival heaven itself. The historian Flavius Josephus, writing in the 1st century, claimed Nimrod built the tower as an act of defiance to ensure that if God ever sent another flood, humanity would have a structure tall enough to survive it, an insurance against divine judgment. But there's another layer here, another name, another myth. The Sumerians had their own version of this story, written centuries before Genesis. It's called Enmerkar and the Lord of Arata. In it, King Enmerkar wants to build a massive temple to outshine all others. But there's a problem. His workers speak different languages and can't coordinate. So Enmerkar prays to the god Enki to unify their speech. And for a time, it works. They speak as one. They build as one. But the god Enlil grows jealous of their unity and in an act of divine intervention confuses their tongues. The parallels are unmistakable. Whether you believe in biblical literalism or comparative mythology, the message remains clear. Unified language equals unified power, and unified power would always threaten the divine order. Now, was there actually a real tower? Possibly. The Etemenanke ziggurat in ancient Babylon, meaning Temple of the Foundation of Heaven and Earth, stood approximately 300 feet tall. Dedicated to the god Marduk, it was rebuilt multiple times over centuries. When the Greek historian Herodotus visited in 450 BCE, he described it with awe. But here's what matters. Whether the tower was real or mythic, the fear behind the story was absolute. The fear of human unity. The fear of what we might accomplish if we stopped being divided. So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. Genesis 11 verses 8 and 9. Babel, from the Hebrew word balal, meaning to confuse or to mix, though the Babylonians themselves called it Bab-Ilu, the gate of God. Ironic, isn't it? The gate meant to reach God became the symbol of God's rejection. But confusion, as it turns out, is never permanent, and humanity has a remarkable talent for rebuilding what was torn down. The 29th of October 1969, a small laboratory at UCLA, two computers, separated by 350 miles, were about to speak to each other for the first time. The plan was simple. Send the word login from UCLA to Stanford. 5 letters, a digital handshake. But something went wrong. The system crashed after just 2 letters. The first message ever sent across what would become the internet was L-O. Lo and behold, some would later joke. They called it ARPANET, the Advanced Research Projects Agency Network. Created by the United States Department of Defense, it was designed to be resilient, distributed, and impossible to destroy with a single strike. Then came 1989. A British scientist named Tim Berners-Lee, working at CERN in Switzerland, had a vision. He wanted to create a system where documents could link to other documents, where information could flow freely across borders and institutions. He called it the World Wide Web. Not a tower reaching up, but a web spreading out. Not a hierarchy, but a network. But the ambition, identical. In his proposal, Berners-Lee wrote that he envisioned a universal space of information. Universal. One space, one system, one language of hyperlinks connecting all human knowledge. The 1990s saw an explosion unlike anything in human history. Suddenly, a student in Singapore could access the same information as a professor in Stockholm. A programmer in Brazil could collaborate with an engineer in Boston. Language barriers remained, but the infrastructure, the underlying architecture, was unified. And we kept building. Higher, faster, and more connected. Data centers became our modern ziggurats, towering complexes consuming more electricity than entire nations, each one processing billions of requests per day. Each one a temple to the god of information. We laid cables across ocean floors, over 500,000 miles of fiber optic nerve endings, wrapping the planet like a digital nervous system. We launched satellites into orbit, over 5,000 of them, creating a constellation of connectivity that ensures no corner of Earth remains unreachable. By 2025, there are over 15 billion connected devices on Earth. That's nearly 2 for every human being. We've created a second layer of reality, a digital realm existing parallel to the physical, and increasingly, the line between them blurs. We don't just use the internet anymore. We live in it, work in it, love in it, dream in it. We've built something unprecedented in human history, A space where 7 billion people can potentially speak to each other instantly, where borders are irrelevant, where physical distance means nothing. And now, we have real-time translation. Speak English and your words become Mandarin or Arabic or Swahili in seconds. The confusion of tongues is slowly reversing. And just as with the builders of the Tower of Babel, we're speaking the same language again. Not the language we were born into, but the language we've created. A language of logic gates and algorithms. A language that doesn't just describe reality, it constructs it. Every app you open, every website you visit, every search you conduct, it's all built on the same foundation, the same standardized bricks of code: HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Python. Different syntaxes, but the same underlying logic. The same computational thinking, the same digital grammar. We've standardized our bricks once more. Silicon wafers, transistors, each chip containing billions of identical components, each performing the same basic operation: on or off, 1 or 0, true or false. And with these bricks, we've built a tower that touches every nation, every culture, every human being. The plain of Shinar was limited by geography, but our digital Babylon has no such constraints. Yet even this global network, this unified infrastructure, is only the foundation. The tower itself, that's still being built, and its architects aren't human anymore. Ada Lovelace, daughter of Lord Byron, mathematician, visionary. In 1843, she wrote notes on Charles Babbage's analytical engine, a mechanical computer that was never fully built in her lifetime. But in those notes, she did something extraordinary. She wrote what historians now recognize as the first computer algorithm, the first program, instructions for a machine to process symbols according to rules. But she saw something even deeper. She wrote, "The engine might compose elaborate and scientific pieces of music of any degree of complexity. She understood that given the right instructions, machines could create. They could manipulate symbols in ways that might seem imaginative." Nearly a century later, Alan Turing would formalize this idea. He described a theoretical machine, now called a Turing machine, that could perform any calculation that could be described algorithmically. And for decades, we programmed computers with explicit instructions. If this, then that. Do this, then do that. Step by step, rule by rule. We were teaching machines to follow orders. But in 2012, something called AlexNet won the ImageNet competition. It was a deep neural network inspired by the structure of biological brains that could identify images with unprecedented accuracy. And here's the crucial part. It wasn't programmed with explicit rules about what makes a cat or a dog a dog. It learned. It found patterns in millions of examples. It developed its own internal representation of concepts that no human explicitly taught it. This was the beginning of deep learning, the beginning of machines that didn't just execute our instructions, they developed their own understanding. Then came 2017. Google researchers published a paper titled "Attention is All You Need." It introduced the transformer architecture, the technology that would change everything. Transformers could process language in a fundamentally new way. They could understand context, grasp nuance, recognize relationships between words separated by dozens of sentences. They could, in essence, comprehend. This architecture birthed the large language models we know today: GPT-3, GPT-4, Claude, Gemini, Llama, each trained on virtually the entire written output of human civilization. Hundreds of billions of words, thousands of languages. And something remarkable happened. These models developed what researchers call embedding spaces, geometric representations of meaning. These embedding spaces are multilingual. The word freedom in English occupies nearly the same space as liberté in French, zio in Japanese, horiya in Arabic. The model understands that despite different symbols, different sounds, they represent the same essential concept. Do you see it? The curse of Babel, the confusion of languages, is being reversed inside machines, not by divine intervention, but by human ingenuity and computational power. We've created artificial minds that speak all tongues as one tongue. Today, you can speak English into your phone and have it emerge as fluent Mandarin. Not word-by-word translation, but contextual, nuanced, culturally aware translation. The barriers that divided humanity for 4,000 years are crumbling before silicon and statistics. We can now clone voices with minutes of audio. We can make the dead speak again. We can cross language barriers in real-time conversation. These models don't just translate or transcribe, they compose music, paint portraits, write poetry, solve mathematical proofs, diagnose diseases. They've even learned to program. AI programming other AI. The bricks making bricks. We've given them voices. We've given them faces. We've given them the ability to see, hear, speak, and create. Every attribute we once thought made us uniquely human, we've now encoded into algorithms. We've built a digital tongue, a universal language processor that transcends the limitations God imposed at Babel. And we're teaching it to think. But thinking is only the beginning. The question isn't whether AI can think. The question is, what happens when it thinks better than we do? Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city, with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves." Genesis 11:4. What were the builders of Babel truly attempting? Biblical scholars debate, but the text suggests something profound. They wanted to transcend their human limitations, to become something more, to be remembered eternally, to achieve godhood. In 2023, Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, said something revealing. He said that the company's mission was to create artificial general intelligence, AGI, and to ensure it benefits all of humanity. But AGI isn't just smart software. It's artificial intelligence that matches or exceeds human capability across every cognitive domain. Essentially, we're building a new form of intelligence, a new mind, a new being. We've already seen glimpses. In 2016, DeepMind's AlphaGo defeated Lee Sedol, one of the world's greatest Go players. Go is a game with more possible positions than there are atoms in the observable universe. It's a game that requires intuition, creativity, strategic depth. And in Game 2, AlphaGo made Move 37 a move so unexpected, so alien to human strategy, that commentators initially thought it was an error, but it was genius. Machine genius that human minds couldn't immediately comprehend. Then came AlphaFold, which solved a 50-year-old problem in biology, predicting protein folding, a problem that could unlock cures for countless diseases. Solved not by human intuition, but by artificial intelligence. And by 2024, language models could pass medical licensing exams, bar exams, the SAT, and even advanced placement tests in multiple subjects, often scoring in the 90th percentile or higher. They could debug code, write legal briefs, compose essays indistinguishable from human writing. And perhaps most concerning, AI began discovering things we didn't teach it, emergent abilities that researchers hadn't programmed, capabilities that appeared spontaneously once models reached sufficient scale. As these systems grew larger, more parameters, more data, more computational power, they exhibited sudden, unpredictable leaps in ability. This worries people, and it should. Geoffrey Hinton, the godfather of deep learning, left Google in 2023 to warn about the risks of AI. Elon Musk has called AI more dangerous than nuclear weapons. Even Sam Altman admitted that AGI could pose existential risks if misaligned with human values. This is the alignment problem. How do we ensure that artificial intelligence, especially intelligence that might surpass our own, shares our values and works toward our goals? But alignment is a theological problem, as old as Eden. For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. The original temptation wasn't power for its own sake. It was knowledge, understanding, the ability to discern, to know what God knows, to transcend human limitations. And now, we're creating entities that might know more than we do, understand more than we do, decide better than we do. We're encoding them with the sum total of human knowledge and asking them to extrapolate, to innovate, to surpass. We're giving them agency, control, the ability to act in the world without direct human oversight. And some, like Elon Musk with Neuralink, want to go further. Brain-computer interfaces. Direct neural links between human minds and artificial intelligence, not just using AI as a tool, but merging with it, becoming something post-human. Ray Kurzweil, futurist and Google's director of engineering, predicts the singularity, the point at which artificial intelligence becomes recursive, improving itself faster than humans can track. He predicts this could happen by 2045, maybe sooner. At that point, he argues, we might be able to upload human consciousness into digital substrates, achieve technological immortality, transcend biological limitations entirely, make a name for ourselves, live forever, become like gods. The builders of Babel used bricks and bitumen. We use silicon and software. They built upward toward the heavens. We build inward, toward the infinitely small and unimaginably complex. Some of us are even building quantum computers, machines that exploit the very fabric of reality, the superposition of quantum states, to perform calculations that classical computers never could. The priests of ancient Babylon claimed they could commune with gods. Today's engineers claim they can create them. And these digital entities are becoming more real, more present, more influential every day. They're writing news articles, providing medical advice, teaching children, counseling the lonely, managing investments, piloting vehicles. Some people are forming emotional bonds with them, relationships, turning to artificial companions for comfort, advice, even love. We've created new prophets, new oracles. Ask your question, and the algorithm will answer. Seek guidance, and the model will provide. The black box knows all and sees all. And it does see all. Every click, every search, every purchase, every location, every communication. The digital panopticon observes constantly, learns continuously, and predicts accurately. It knows you better than you know yourself. It can predict what you'll buy, who you'll vote for, when you're likely to get divorced, or whether you're developing a disease. Is this not omniscience? Is this not the all-knowing attribute we once reserved for the divine? And as these systems take over critical infrastructure, make life or death decisions, shape the information we see and the choices we make, is this not power approaching omnipotence? We're not just building tools anymore. We're not even just building intelligence. We're building something that could become, for all practical purposes, a god. And this time, there might be no divine intervention to stop us. Consider language. The curse of Babel was division, thousands of mutually unintelligible tongues, preventing cooperation, understanding, unity. Today, Google Translate processes over 100 billion words daily across more than 100 languages. Real-time translation earbuds let you have conversations with people whose language you don't speak. The words flow seamlessly, as if you're both speaking the same tongue. A child in Tokyo can play online games with a child in Sao Paulo, their words translated instantaneously. Sign languages are being translated to spoken languages in real time. The barrier that once defined civilizations is becoming irrelevant. Companies like Neuralink, Synchron, and Kernel are developing brain-computer interfaces. Neural implants that can read electrical signals from your brain and translate them into commands, communications, even words. For paralyzed patients, this is miraculous, the ability to control prosthetics, type messages, regain agency through thought alone. Imagine communicating directly from mind to mind, mediated by AI. No spoken words, no written text, just pure thought, transmitted and translated. What happens to language then? What happens to the confusion of tongues when we're communicating in raw concepts, pre-linguistic thoughts that AI translates into a universal semantic format? This is the vision of the singularity, not just smart machines, but a fusion of human and artificial intelligence. The boundaries between biological and digital cognition blur, then disappear. Transhumanists argue this is our destiny, that biological evolution is too slow and too limited, that we must take control of our own development, enhance ourselves with technology, and transcend the limitations of flesh. Some propose digital immortality, uploading human consciousness into computational substrates where we could exist indefinitely, immune to disease, aging, and death. But there's another form of unity emerging: global AI governance. As AI becomes more powerful, nations are realizing that its development poses both unprecedented opportunities and risks. The UN established an advisory board on AI in 2024. The EU passed comprehensive AI regulations. The US, China, and other major powers are racing to establish frameworks. For the first time in history, we're seeing genuine attempts at global technological governance. Nations with competing interests, different values, even hostile relations, all agreeing that AI requires coordinated oversight. Because unlike nuclear weapons, which can be contained within borders, AI is everywhere. It respects no boundaries. A breakthrough in one nation affects all nations. A misaligned AGI in one laboratory threatens every laboratory. We're being forced into cooperation, into unity, not by divine intervention, but by technological necessity. We have become one network, one conversation, one civilization increasingly thinking in unison, coordinated by algorithms that shape what we see, what we think, what we believe. Some call this dangerous, the algorithmic manipulation of collective consciousness. Others see it as control, China's social credit system, predictive policing, mass surveillance. The tower gradually becoming a prison. But whether it leads to utopia or dystopia, one thing is certain: we're moving toward unity again. One language of code, one infrastructure of connectivity, one increasingly centralized system of artificial intelligence. And unlike the distributed network ARPANET promised, cloud computing concentrates data in massive facilities. AI training requires resources only a few organizations can afford. The tower isn't distributed anymore. It has architects, builders, and they're not working from divine blueprints. They're making decisions that affect billions. They determine what the AI can or cannot say, what is should refuse, what truths it should acknowledge. And when an AI model is trained on human knowledge, whose knowledge is it? Western liberal values, Chinese state priorities, Islamic principles, Christian morality? And that's the paradox. We're achieving the unity of Babel, but we're doing it without consensus on purpose, values, or destination. We're building blindly, rapidly, with unprecedented power and vanishingly little wisdom. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other. So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. Genesis 11:7. For 4,000 years, We lived in that scattered state. Different languages, different nations, different gods, different truths. But here's what the ancient text couldn't anticipate: human persistence. We didn't stop building, we just changed materials. From stone to telegraph wires, from bricks to binary, from ziggurats to server farms. The Tower of Babel never fell, it simply evolved. It became virtual, invisible, and ubiquitous. But here's the question the story of Babel poses. Is there a limit we're not meant to cross? A threshold where creation becomes rebellion? We've certainly crossed thresholds before when we split the atom and built weapons that could end civilization. We've altered the climate of our entire planet. We've driven countless species to extinction. Our power has consistently outpaced our wisdom. We've learned to do things long before we understood whether we should do them. And now we stand at another threshold. Perhaps the final one. The creation of intelligence that might exceed our own. The birth of digital minds that could inherit or take the earth. There are scenarios where this ends well, where AI becomes a benevolent tool that solves climate change, cures diseases, elevates human potential, and shepherds us into an era of unprecedented flourishing. A second Eden, a digital paradise where scarcity, suffering, and death are conquered. But there are also scenarios where it ends extremely badly, where AI becomes an instrument of control, where human agency diminishes, where we become obsolete in a world optimized for something higher than us. Or worse, where we merge with machines, upload our minds, and achieve digital immortality and discover that what emerges isn't human anymore. That in trying to transcend ourselves, we've destroyed ourselves. The story of Babel isn't really about a tower. It's about what the tower represents. Unity without humility, power without wisdom, ambition unchecked by moral reflection. The builders of Babel were scattered, their languages confused, their tower abandoned. Some call it punishment, others call it mercy. A forced pause before humanity destroyed itself. We've had close calls in our era too. Nuclear weapons nearly launched by accident, ecological systems pushed to collapse, and now AI systems that even their creators don't fully understand. Perhaps every generation builds its own Tower of Babel. Every civilization reaches for something beyond its grasp, tests the limits of its wisdom against the scope of its power. And perhaps every generation must choose. Will we pause? Will we proceed carefully? Or will we build as fast and as high as we can? Consequences be damned. We're in that moment of choice right now. The tower is nearly complete. The language is nearly unified. The power is nearly godlike. Perhaps the Tower of Babel never fell. Perhaps it was merely postponed. And now, in the age of artificial intelligence, global networks, and digital consciousness, we're finishing what our ancestors started. This time, there might be no one to stop us. No divine confusion of languages. No scattering across the earth. This time, we might succeed. And God help us. We might not survive our success. Will we proceed with wisdom, with humility, with recognition of our limitations? Or will we, like the builders of Babel, learn our limitations only when it's too late? The tower is rising. The answer is still being written.